In this video, I'll be talking you through a case study, and the case study is going to be related to a maintenance work execution process dashboard that I created. So I'll be talking you through each of the different pages of the dashboard. I'll be talking you through the main design choices and some of the Power BI technology I used. And I'll also be talking about some of the improvements that I think I would make having used the dashboard now for a few months. Hi, this is Jason from Effective Dashboards, helping maintenance and reliability professionals get the most out of Power BI. So welcome back to another video. So this is the dashboard here, and it's used to track the maintenance work execution process. Okay, so just to give us a little bit of a foundation here, I'm going to quickly go through the work execution process steps. Now, the work execution process is a process that is used to manage work. And one of the key documents that we're going to be tracking is called a work order. Okay, so a work order flows through this process here, and the work order contains all the information that is related to a repair or a piece of preventative maintenance that has to be carried out against a piece of equipment. So first of all, we've got to identify the work and we've got to assign a priority. Then we prepare the work, and that's where we add in the sequential tasks that need to be carried out to go and carry out the work, and also allocate any of the labour codes, so who needs to work on it and how long do they need to work, and any spare parts as well. Then we schedule the work, so that's making optimal use of the resources we've got at the site, and making sure we don't have too much work, but also we don't have too little work for the people to actually be utilised and make sure they're productive. And it also takes into account any constraints that we've got as well. So a piece of equipment might need to be isolated to carry out a piece of maintenance activity. So that all feeds into the schedule there. Then we go and execute the work. So we need to make sure the work's done efficiently, it's done safely. And then finally, we close out the work, and that is where we capture information related to what was actually carried out. And that's really useful information for a historical point of view to analyze our reliability. So how is our equipment breaking and what are we doing to fix it? And also that can feed into this preparation so that the next time a piece of work comes along, we can go and look at the previous work and we can see how long it took and how much spare parts we needed, etc. So that is really good information here, and it becomes a little bit of a database of all the work that's been affected on pieces of equipment. Okay, so a very quick overview of the work execution process. That's a process we're going to be mapping out and tracking as part of the dashboard that I've created. Okay, so when it comes to requirements, what we want to be able to do is we want to be able to make sure that we understand how many work orders are sitting at each one of these steps here, each one of these high level steps within the work execution process. Now, we want to track two things. We want to make sure that work is flowing through here efficiently, and we want to see if there's any bottlenecks where work has been held up. And we want to be able to then understand if there is a lot of work sitting waiting preparation, or there's some work that needs to be identified and prioritized. We then want to be able to say, well, what is the important work that we need to go and actually focus on moving to the next stage of the process? Okay. Now, ideally, you'd be able to work would flow through here efficiently, but we have, like all companies, there's a limited amount of resources, so we've got to focus our efforts on the things that matter, the high priority work, the work that's safety critical, and the work that's got the potential to cause us a business impact. So that's the kind of high level requirements, is to be able to track the flow of work through here and identify which work orders within each one of these processes are kind of stuck and need to be progressed to the next stage so that we can get the work off into the prepared, ready to be scheduled, ultimately executed, and then we make sure that we actually capture some good quality information once the work's been completed. Okay, so let's get started. So this is a front page, and I'll just talk you through some of the characteristics. Now, there used to be a logo here, but I've desanitized the data because I don't want to because it's been created for a client. There's a space here to put a bit of a logo just to give it a little bit of internal branding. Um, for each of the titles, I like to put a title and then a subtitle. Okay, and that just allows you to somebody that's looking at this to understand what the purpose of this page is for. So alongside here, we've got navigation buttons, so you can actually go directly to a page, and the different people and different roles will be responsible for viewing these pages. So I thought it was important that we can navigate to one of these pages, and these are the pages we'll talk you through. There's pretty much a page for every part of the process. So identify and prioritize, prepare, scheduling. There's a couple for execution, and I'll talk these through talk you through those why in a second. And then we've got Closeout, and then we've got a catch-all at the end here, which is basically an overview of all the work orders that are at each status code in the work execution process. There's a little bit about the report purpose, and at the bottom here we've got the last time this report was actually refreshed. So that's quite useful to basically allow whoever's looking at this report to see if the data is up to date. Okay, and it's quite prominent here. I've underlined it and made it bold to make it prominent. Talking through the actual dashboard front page itself, so we've got some filters along the top here. I try to keep it limited and make sure that we can filter by installation, by department, and by discipline. So these are the things that we'd want to filter by, so that either you want to look at all of the work, or you can select individual installation codes here. Okay, and then departments and disciplines, you can select those, and you can filter for your installation, for your department, and even within that for your discipline. So if I'm working for a particular installation and I'm a mechanical supervisor, I can go and filter for my department, and I can see the discipline is mechanical, so that I know I can filter by maintenance, and then I can filter by mechanical to know that this is my work and the work that I've got some control over. So when it comes to the actual main dashboard and the layout, the visualizations, what I've actually done is I've created this background here using Figma. Okay, so I've only used it for this front page, and so the background for this and the grey background here and the background for each one of these cards is all being created in Figma. Now you could do it in some other tool like PowerPoint, and then you just import it in as a background. Now that makes it a little bit easier to load things up, but I have found one of the things is trying to get the fonts to match. Okay, so if you've got a mix of these fonts here, now I've actually, all of these fonts that I've got for these card headers are all from Figma, but trying to get that fonts to match with the fonts that we use for example, in these visuals here can be a little bit tricky. So just something to consider if you're going to use a third-party tool to develop backgrounds, which is a really good idea, but perhaps just if I was to do this again, I probably wouldn't use the fonts as well. I'd leave those to be either text cards or text boxes, or just use the native titles that are within some of the card visuals. Okay, so in terms of the visuals, I've got three different types of visuals here, really, well, maybe four if you include this one. We've got these cards here that have got a number, so that's the number of the number of work orders that are currently at that status, and I'll come back to that in a second. And then underneath we've got the number last week, and then we've got a change from last week. Now the other thing I've added in to this is these little info buttons here. So this one here is just an image, just a tooltip, and it really is useful to show, particularly when you've got a complicated card with a few different things going on like this one here, what each of the numbers are. Now the previous week's value it's not obvious without looking at that it is the previous week's value, but once you know it, then it's fine. So I didn't want to really put previous week or something here. I could have done, but I thought it looked a little bit messy, and once you understand that that's a previous week's value, most people are going to be looking at this dashboard on a weekly basis or even more frequently. So once they get that in their head, that's fine. That information's there, and it doesn't need to be repeated each time and called out. Then we've got a trend here, and for the trend, it's a little bit messy here because of these auto positioning of the numbers, which it tends never to be particularly great. It is quite cramped actually in here, but what I've done is I've put the first, the last, the highest, and the lowest values there, just to, because I didn't want to put an X and a Y axis to that little spark line. I do think it's important to give it a bit of context so that you can see, okay, what's the first and last values and the highest and lowest values, so you can kind of get a sense of the range that's been displayed on the little spark line here. Now the other type of visual we've got is this one here, which doesn't have a trend. It's just got a split by the type of work order. Okay, is it safety critical or is it non-safety critical? And that's quite important for some of these, more so than a trend. Okay, so that's why we decided to choose either a bar chart or a trend. Now, I've also, this value here is the total number of unapproved work orders. Now that's quite important because it's work that has been unapproved, and I mean this is across maybe 10, 12 sites, so it looks quite high, but on a site-by-site basis it's a lot lower, and it's made up data anyway. So the number is split by these three status codes here. Okay, so we talked about each stage in the work execution process. This one here is identify and prioritize, and any work order that's at this WAPPR, WWORM, or WInfo, these are all work order status codes that are related to this part of the process. So I thought it was important to get the overall value of unapproved work, and then just splitting that value down so that you can see how many are at each one of these different status codes. And this little line here with this little accent is used just to subtly pull that number there into its component parts. Now the other thing in terms of colour, and I never really want to use colour for the sake of using colour, but I thought it was I thought it looked better and it was more appealing just to add a little accent colour to the top of each one of these, and just a gradient of blue, and we'll carry that sort of theme throughout the dashboard. This one's grey, but yeah, that was just a little accent colour. I thought it lifted it a little bit. And then the other thing I've done is I've put this little pop here to put a shadow, a drop shadow, which again just helps to kind of pop it out and just lift it a little bit. And then at the end here we've got the total number of unapproved work orders by safety critical and non-safety critical. So rather than split each one of these down, I've just put the total at the end here. Okay, so that's identify and prioritize. Now within each one of these, I've got a different type of tooltip. Now this one here explains what the measure is for. Okay, so we've got the performance measure, unapproved work. We've got the calculation method. So a bit of a high level description of how it's calculated, and then the reason for the measure. So why is it we're actually measuring this value here? So why is it we've got this value on the card? Now you'll notice is one thing that's missing here is conditional formatting. Okay, so typically in a KPI, if it's a KPI, you need to have some sort of level of performance that you're going to be accepting and that you want to strive towards or avoid, i.e. be below. But we haven't put any conditional formatting on this dashboard yet. Now it will be something that will come, but at this point in time we just want to get people using it. We don't want it to be, rid of this tooltip here. We don't want it to be, we didn't want to use it straight away, but ultimately we will put some sort of conditional formatting on here once we understand what is the an acceptable level for the number of work orders at each one of these status codes. Okay, now preparation, pretty much the same concept here. We've got the number of work orders that are waiting to be prepared. We've got these ones here are, like I say, anomalies. So I try to spot anomalies and make it easy to focus on moving the work orders that are most important through the process. So this is the total number that are waiting preparation, but these ones here, so this one, WPrep and past its target finish date. So each work order has got a target finish date, and that is a date that we've said based on the risk that or based on the frequency of preventative maintenance, this is the date that we want to get that work done by. Now if you've got work order that's unprepared and it's past its target finish date, then that is really a priority to get that prepared. Okay, because it's work that we need to try and get into the schedule as quickly as possible. So that's what that's calling out there. And then this is waiting preparation close to the target finish date. So once you've got control of the ones that are past the target finish date, you want to make sure that as work is approaching that target finish date, and this one here, if we hover over this, we can see that the number of work orders which are at WPrep status and within 30 days of the target finish date. So you can see that second line there. Okay, moving on to scheduling, we've got scheduled work that is scheduled past the target finish date. So this is important because we've got work that we've said is going to be, it's got a scheduled start date. So a work order has got a date that we're planning to schedule the work, we're planning to carry out the work, the scheduled start date, but that date is past its target finish date. So again, that would be work that we'd want to look at. Approaching the target finish date but not at a scheduled status. So there's a status called shed. Is it here? SCHD. Now if work is approaching its target finish date, and I think it's within 14 days. No, we can see it's 30 days. Okay, so it's basically work that's within or equal to 30 days of the current date. So if work is approaching its target finish date and it's not scheduled, then we need to get it prepared and get it into the schedule, because if we don't schedule it, then it's not going to get done. And then we've got unprepared scheduled work. So this is any work that we've got in our schedule that is in the next 14 days that is not scheduled. Okay, so it's waiting for preparation, or it's waiting for materials or whatever, because that's a risk. Okay, if we've got work that we're scheduling in the next 14 days but it doesn't have the status that says it's scheduled and it's ready to go, then that's something we would want to call out. So it's all about looking for the exceptions in the process. There's no real point in just listing the number of work orders that are at each status. Now we've got a separate report for that, but this is to help us pinpoint the anomalies, the work that we need to really address. And that's what each one of these different cards is attempting to do. Then we get to execution. So this is telling us, the execution part is how are we actually doing in terms of the work that we said we'd execute this week. Okay, so this is all about operational work that we've identified as being scheduled. The schedule's been frozen on a Saturday morning, or whatever day it is that you freeze a schedule. We're going to track and commit to that, and we want to protect that schedule because it's work that we've made a promise to complete, and we want to be able to track that progress through the completion of that schedule each week. So that's quite important. So this is going to track the work that's been scheduled and not complete. Now, the schedule just started yesterday, so it's there's still quite a lot of work here that we've got to complete this week. And then underneath here, we've got how much work was scheduled versus how much work has actually been achieved. So that's just a little subtle, just a sub bit of information here, like these other ones. And then we've got the fill-in work and the scheduled the compliance this week. So we've done 4% of the work this week, and then we've got fill-in work and break-in work under here. So how much work have we pulled into the schedule that wasn't originally part of the schedule? So that gives us a little bit of an indication as to how we're progressing with the current week's execution. And then we've got closeout. So how many work orders are waiting to be closed off? Okay, so the closeout part of the process is essentially 2 stages. A technician closes the work order to say it's done and records information, and then a supervisor reviews that work and confirms that the information is correct, the information is complete, and it's accurate. So in this example here, there's a chunk of work that needs to be reviewed here. And then the same as the top here, this closeout is completed and it's got 2 statuses associated with it, qual and comp. Okay, so that's the status codes that are there. Qual means there's some sort of quality assurance issue that needs to be addressed, and comp means it's ready for the supervisor to go and look at it. Okay, so that is the front page. So it really just gives us a little bit of an overview of the process, and if there's any work orders that are at any of these stages here, then we've got something that we need to address. Is pretty much it. Okay, so another feature that I've got here that I think is really important is the ability to drill through on each one of these different numbers or aspects here, so that you can start off with a number and then you can drill down into the actual transactions, and then you can filter out anything that you want from there. So if I go and right click on here, we can see we've got a drill through. Okay, now each one of these has got its own drill through, and if you drill through onto this list here, now 628 is probably too many. I'd probably filter it by a site and then by a department and then some sort of discipline. But just so that you can see, it's a pretty straightforward table with a list of different transactions here. It would be the work order description here, but again, I've sanitized that information. But one of the key parts that I really like is I've used a dynamic text title here to embed the measure with so that with the number of actual transactions you can see in the actual table. And I think that's quite important, so that you've got that continuity between the number you've clicked on and drilled through, 628, and then a little bit of confirmation here that you're actually seeing 628. Now you could put a card or something here, but it just is a little bit subtler and doesn't take up so much space. So I quite like that idea. And then you use the back button to go back. Okay, so let's look at each of the different pages now. So if we go to identify and prioritize, now I've gone for this navigation here, but there will also be navigation along the side when we actually publish it up to the Power BI service. I probably would start to do away with this on-page navigation, and hopefully the Power BI service navigation will become better. Okay, it's pretty limited just now, but and I thought that was a bit nicer there just for the landing page. But if we click on here, it's going to take us to the identify and prioritize. Okay, so this is pretty much a deeper dive and a repeat actually of some of the information that we've got in the front page, but with a few extra graphs here, so that you can, a few extra visuals so we can analyze the data from a couple of different aspects, and it's also got a list of transactions. Okay, so rather than do a drill through, if I just click on the cross filter here, then that's going to filter that underneath here. Now, what it's also done is it's actually filtered this for that one specific day, because this filter here is only filtered to display the work orders on the most recent date. Now, the underlying data for this is basically a date stamped snapshot of all of the work orders that are currently open on a particular day. So for this one here, for this trend here, I want to see all of the work orders that are open over the period of time, which has gone back 3 months, I think it is. But for this one here, I only want to see the most recent snapshot. So whenever I click on here, it carries a filter through, and that's why we're only seeing the one for the 16th, which was yesterday. Okay, so we've got the number here. Now I've made this a dominant color. Okay, so thinking about Gestalt principles, anything that's different tends to stand out. Okay, so that's why I've made this different, as in I've made it white text instead of the other ones, which are kind of this off black kind of color, and I've made it a bold blue color here. Okay, then we've got the safety and non-safety critical work. Then I've split this down by the different status codes. We've got a trend here. The thing I've actually applied here is this smoothing of the trend, which I think is a really neat feature that was introduced just a couple of months ago for Power BI Desktop, and just makes it look a lot less jaggedy, particularly if you've got something like this that is a bit up and down. And then the additional visuals I've got, the first one is we want to be able to understand how long the work order has been at its current status for. Okay, and then this is what this is. It's basically just different bins. So if a work order, we've got 1,161 work orders that have been at that current status waiting approval for more than 90 days. Okay, now bear in mind this is made up data. That's quite a lot. And then for 7 days it's been 130, between 7 and 15 we can see. So and then I've used a gradient for the colours, okay, to make this bolder and this less so, because these are less important than these. And then unapproved by discipline, so these are the different disciplined codes. And again, the one at the top here, I've graded this rather than by the number of days, I've graded this by, or there's a colour gradient there that's based on the number of work orders allocated to that particular supervisor's code. So at the top here, it becomes more obvious, as well as the size of the bar. There's a colour here as well, a colour aspect to that as well, and it becomes more obvious that these are the ones that need to be addressed, because there's more of these. Okay, now I could have used some conditional formatting here as well, just to call out if something was perhaps safety critical or whatever, but I haven't gone for that just yet. Okay, so that's the waiting approval tab. If we go for preparation. So in this one here, because there's 3 different trends, I've actually drawn the trends into the cards. Now I've used a similar principle, but I've used a different colour of blue for each one of these just to draw them apart. And we've got like a constructed KPI card. So you've got the value there, you've got the difference between last week and the value last week, and then we've got a little trend with the lowest, the highest, the first and the last. And then underneath, this is a split of the different codes that make up work that's waiting for materials. So there's waiting for materials, or waiting for, they're basically 3 different codes that are a subset of the codes that mean we're waiting for something to be delivered, spare parts to be delivered. So I've put a subtle headline here for that as well. And then split by safety critical. This time I've used a column chart rather than a bar chart, purely just how the actual visuals fit onto the page. And I could have used a bar chart here, but there would have been really thick bars, which would have been, and they'd have been really squashed. The aspect ratio wouldn't have been particularly great. And then we've got this this work orders at wait and prep by days to target finish date. Okay, so this is an attempt to try and prioritize which work orders we should try and prepare first. Now, what I've done here is I've binned them again based on how many days it is until the target finish date. Because remember, you want to be able to prepare things in enough time to get it into the schedule and get it executed before its target finish date. Now, if something is past its target finish date, so that's the first aspect. And then along the top here, we've got the severity. So how severe is the potential impact if we don't fix it? Okay, so one is, these ones are blank. These ones, 1 through to 5, 5 is the most severe. So if it's really severe and it's in the target finish date is in the past, we're really on borrowed time here before something happens. So we really want to get after that. And then as a severity 3 or a severity 4 or a severity 5 will both be coloured, but the severity 5 is red, and this one's, as it becomes less and less, or as it becomes more time till its target finish date, it doesn't totally disappear, it just becomes a pinker colour, so less of I'm using a different shade of red here, a pink shade here. There is probably a technical term for that, but I can't remember, think about it off the top of my head. Okay, so that then allows you to focus in on here. I'd probably make these white, these colours white here, because it is a little bit difficult to see. The contrast here isn't so great there. You can't really see that number's 5 or 1 or whatever. But yeah, it's not obvious, but you can see it. And we've got the list of transactions underneath and all of these. And here we can see that's at 7 there. Okay, so that is the weight and preparation, or the work preparation page. Okay, so when it comes to scheduling, we've got the same sort of setup here. Again, I've used a different colour for each one of these cards, and it's a combination of a number, a little bit of a change from last week, a comparison with last week to see if we're getting in the short term better or worse, and then we've got this trend here. Now the other thing I've used bookmarks to create this effect here, this tabbed effect here, so that you can click on each one of these and you can see underneath the related work orders to each one of these cards at the top here, and it seemed to fit quite nicely underneath here. I don't think you're able to make these colours the same as that one. That would have been pretty neat. But yeah, you can click on each one of these and it will show you the related transactions underneath here, which is a useful addition there. But again, a couple of other visuals here, and just to give a little bit more of perspective and give you more options for cross filtering as well. And I've also embedded this number here so we can see that there's a correlation between, or the match here between the 915 here and the 915 work orders here, just drawing that two together. Now let's look at the execution current week. So there's two execution tabs. One of them is looking at the current week because we want to be able to look at where we are in terms of executing our schedule this week, but we also want to be able to look at where we were at the end of the week. We want to look back at last week to see how did we get on. Okay, so this one here, this current week, is looking at the current week, and it's telling us that we've achieved 4% of our scheduled work so far. Still to be completed is 1,283, and then there's a little bit of a summary here. 60 out of 1,343 scheduled work order tasks completed. And then we've got the fill-in work and the break-in work, 2%, 32 work orders. So I've got it as a percentage of the total work scheduled and an absolute number of work orders for each one of these. And then this table here breaks it down by each of the different supervisors. And the supervisors are essentially the people that are responsible for the squads of technicians, and how much work they had scheduled in the week, how much is still to be complete, how much has been attained, how much fill-in work, how much break-in work they've got. So that and this trend will continue up towards this target here as each of the days passes. So after Sunday's passed, we're going to get a value here. Hopefully it's going to be up at maybe 7 or 8% of the work, so we can see a gradual increase over the week. Now the other thing I've done is I've drawn, subtly used these four colours here, these two shades of blue and then the dark and the light orange, to draw it to the different column headers here. So we can see it's scheduled, that's to be scheduled, we've got attained work, and we've got fill-in work, and we've got break-in work. And then underneath here, again, I've used a similar approach to the one I used with the bookmarks, but this time I've got tabs along the side rather than across the top. And again, this was just something to do with how the space was working out. And then you can look and say, well, if I want to see what these 32 fill-in work orders were, you can click on here, and that's going to list that 32 work orders so you can see what they are. Now once you've got those, if you want to say, well, what were the 3 for the construction supervisor, for example, you can click on here. And we can also see that the construction supervisor has actually completed 16% of their work, and that ties in with that figure there. So this is really allowing you to analyse the in-week schedule. How are we doing towards our target to get all the work completed, or at least 90% of the work completed by the end of the week? Now the other one we've got here is execution analysis. Now it looks back at the previous week, and we can look and we can see how we progressed throughout the week. So there was a nice increase here, and ultimately we ended up completing 72% of the work that we'd actually put into the schedule that week. And it's pretty much the same. The only difference is that we can basically see the work at the end of the week rather than the work as it progresses through the week. So it's the whole of last week, and we can go and we can look back to the last week, the current week, or we can look back to another week as well if we want to. So we can choose that there, and then we can go and choose any prior week that we want. So maybe I want to go back and look at something at the end of August, for example. We can see how we got on for that week. Okay, so that's the scheduled execution current week and execution analysis. And then we've got the closeout. So using the colour here to draw attention to this top left hand side, the breakdown of the different status codes that make the closeout work, split by discipline. We've used this again for the days, how many days they've been at that current status for, waiting for closeout, safety critical, non-safety critical, and the different types of work. I've highlighted these red because these are the work types that are safety critical. This APM and PSC are the safety critical work types. And then we've got the list of transactions underneath. And instead of showing some information around the scheduled start dates or the target finish dates or whatever, the work's been done, and now we're into the codification of the errors, of the defects really. So I've got the problem, the cause, and the remedy codes here, so you can look through these and see if they've actually got information that's relevant, and particularly if something's got a corrective work order with no problem code, then that's going to be something you want to go and investigate and look and see if it is actually something you want to approve as being complete or set to this qual status that says we've got a quality issue with that. We need to go and talk to the technician and find out what actually happened. Now the other thing you might have noticed is these are all underlined, and they're hyperlinks through to the underline under application. Okay, so that could be, in this example, it's Maximo, but it could be linked through to SAP, or it could be to any of the other CMMS systems that you want to store your Maximo, store your work orders in. Okay, so that is pretty much this pages for each one of the different stages in the work execution process. So it allows you to go in and analyse that stage and find out more details about the list of work orders that are related to that stage or stuck at that stage, and then actually do something about it by perhaps going through into the actual work order itself and progressing it to the next stage, completing some of the information, or going and talking to somebody about the work and seeing if it can get progressed. Now finally, as a catch-all, we've got the work orders at each status. Now this is a report or a page that has got the list of installations here, and these are the different codes that a work order can be at. Okay, so these are all the codes that a work order can be at, all the status codes, and they're in a sequential order here. So for each one of these, we've got a tooltip, and it's going to show us for that. So we can see that value there is 79, and that correlates with the last value. We've got the first, the last, the highest, lowest. Again, a little trend of the work, a trend of the actual hours related to that work. So we can see even though the work's up and down, the actual hours has dropped significantly and has been pretty steady since. and then we can see the days at current status. So how many of these 79 work orders? We can see 66 of those have been waiting approval for more than 66 days. And then there's an option to right click on here and drill through and see that work orders if you need to. There's a few different filters here. This one here toggles the values that are displayed here between a count of the number of work orders for each installation at that status, or the number of hours associated with that work order, so the quantity of hours associated with that work orders. So it toggles between those two. A few other different slicers here just allow you to see safety critical, the work type, the days that have been at that status for it, etc. And then there's a discipline and department at the bottom there. Now that is it. Oh, we've got a tooltip on here as well. Yeah, I've just added it to each one of these. Okay, so that's the work execution process dashboard. Hopefully you found it useful. Hopefully you can get a little bit of inspiration for any of the dashboards that you're creating. And if you've got any comments or any questions, just leave it in the comments below in the video. And if you found this useful, it's always appreciated if you could give it a thumbs up and a like. And if you want to keep up to date with the latest videos, I tend to release one every few weeks, then hit the subscribe button and you'll get a notification whenever I publish a new video. Thanks again, and I'll talk to you in the next video.